Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mikey. You guys are rocking with me on Mike's Intellectual Corner. On today's episode, we're going to be continuing our Eastory series with the Eastern Front animated 1943-1944. Don't forget to check out my short series if you want. You don't have to. It's called Today in History. With that being said, let's just go ahead and get right into it.
In the last months of 1942, the German forces were encircled at Stalingrad. At first, the Germans hoped to reverse the situation by relieving the pocket and maintaining it by air supply. However, as 1943 began, the Germans were forced to abandon their plans to relieve the city and were pushed back from its approaches.
That air supply did not last too long because, if I'm not mistaken, that was the main reason why a lot of them started losing hope, is because that air supply just stopped coming around.
Abandoned their plans to relieve the city and were pushed back from its approaches. Despite that, they ordered their troops in Stalingrad to hold out as long as possible in order to tie up Soviet units and buy time. The advance of the Red Army created the possibility of the German troops in the Caucasus to be cut off. They ordered a full withdrawal from the region, while their forces in the north kept the path of retreat open. The main effort of the Red Army was, however, directed against the Hungarian and Italian units on the northern flank. Their lightly equipped forces were unable to hold the line and were forced into a harsh winter retreat. Most of them lost their combat capabilities or were destroyed, leaving a large gap in the Axis lines. The German units in the north had also to retreat, but they were able to keep their battle worthiness intact. At the same time, the Germans managed to pull back part of their forces from the Caucasus. The remaining troops formed a...
Isn't it crazy that even with 3 million troops, they're still being stretched out this freaking thin, because the line is just so freaking long. But still, 3 million troops still is not enough to really even break the line with Russia. It's kind of crazy.
Pull back part of their forces from the Caucasus. The remaining troops formed a breachhead on the coast to retain the opportunity for a summer push towards the oil fields. During January, both sides had their full attention set on the southern sector. The lack of the German reserves allowed the Red Army to achieve two small but significant victories. They re-established a land connection to Leningrad, and in the central part of the front they captured the railway junction of Velikie Luki. For the Axis, the situation in the south continued to deteriorate. The German troops in Stalingrad surrendered.
Damn, 91,000 soldiers off to the Gulag just like that. Isn't that kind of sad and crazy to think about? These men lived through so much stuff in the first half of the 21st century, and just like that, in their life with the Gulag. Pretty sad to think about. Let's get back.
The German troops in Stalingrad surrendered, freeing up significant numbers of Soviet units. The Red Army forces moving west into the Ukraine were not very formidable, but the large gap in the Axis line left them little opposition. The Soviet command decided to exploit this opportunity and attempted to cut off almost all of the army group south. In response, the Germans used the forces retreating from the Caucasus to extend their front eastwards and pulled their main force west. The Red Army moved further west to bypass their line and encircle them, but this overextended their forces. The Germans counterattacked from two sides and disorganized their forward detachments.
Damn, I feel like if the Russians probably would have committed maybe 20% more in the north from that and swooped them down, they probably would have been able to make it. But I feel like that might be a kind of a running problem in this offensive front. But let's see, guys.
From two sides and disorganized their forward detachments. Having caught the Soviet southern flank off balance, the Germans now wanted to push in both from north and south at the same time, destroying the whole Soviet force. They began to muster their units for the northern attack. In the south, their troops continued onwards, retaking Kharkov. But in the north, they failed to concentrate a force sufficient for the attack, though they were able to stop the Red Army's advance. By this time, both the Soviets and the Germans had exhausted their forces and went on defensive. As the fighting in the south had drawn all German reinforcements,
I'll say this, even with the German army being as stretched out thin as they really are right now, you can really see their military genius, and just the fact that, again, just being that stretched out, they're still able to pin the Russians back. And I'm pretty sure, that might have to do with their bad equipment and stuff like that, but it's still pretty impressive, All right, let's get back into it, guys.
offensive. As the fighting in the south had drawn all German reinforcements, the Red Army prepared to launch a major offensive in the north and center. The Germans realized the danger and responded by abandoning their most vulnerable positions before the Soviets had finished deployment, and the attacks that took place failed to achieve their goals. Being confronted with a much stronger German line, the Red Army abandoned its offensive plans and the Eastern Front became quiet. With the end of the winter campaign, the Axis had lost the capabilities necessary to knock the Soviet Union out of the war by capturing the areas vital for its war effort. Now they planned to win through attrition by holding on to the occupied areas and inflicting vast casualties to the attacking Red Army. In this way, they could drain the areas remaining under the Soviet control, dry up resources, and create a stalemate. The Red Army, on the other hand, set out to take back the economically vital western lands of the Soviet Union, which would give it a strategic advantage. However, this time they would play it safe. Their previous offensives had been threatened by the German armored counterattacks, and this time they decided to receive them on prepared defenses. At the same time, with building up the fortifications, the Red Army formed a massive offensive force. As part of their defense strategy, the Germans planned a number of limited offensives to encircle Soviet.
Yeah, that's a huge amount of men, and at the same time, that might be like the last of their men resources. So I feel like at the end of this, obviously it doesn't happen, but if something would have happened and say all 6 million of those men are just cut down, then they would men or freaking women and children or something. I don't know, because I feel like that's like it. That's all they got. Let's go back, guys.
The Germans planned a number of limited offensives to encircle Soviet forces and shorten their defensive line. The most promising of these was the encirclement of the Soviet units in the Kursk salient. It took 3 months for the German build-up to match the gradually improved Soviet defenses, and in the beginning of July they launched their attack. The Germans made some headway, but were ultimately stopped dead in the depth of the Soviet defenses. Having for the time tied up the strongest German armored units, the Red Army now released its forces for the offensive. The attacks were to be carried out in consecutive stages along several sectors of the front. First, the Red Army struck into the rear of the German troops north of Kursk.
I know also, I feel like a number, because there's a shit freaking troops out here, especially for the Russians, but I feel like a good number of these, you also have to remember, are probably penal divisions, which, if you know, a lot of us don't know what that is pretty much your criminals and stuff like that, your unwanteds, and you just pretty much put them on the front line as cannon fodder, which again, if you don't know what that is, it's just throwing them into the meat grinder, you know what I'm saying, just to, because there's a war that has to be fought, men has to die. Those are men that you'd rather die than your own. I know it's messed up, but that's the reality of this type of war, this type of total war. But let's go and get back into it, guys.
The rear of the German troops north of Kursk. Being unable to contain the attack and wishing to avoid the danger of encirclement, the Germans began the process of evacuating the salient. At the same time, the Red Army launched an attack in the south. The Germans redeployed their forces and contained it. By this time, the Soviet units south of Kursk had finished reorganization and pushed towards Kharkov. The Germans redeployed their forces to the sector but failed to hold the city, though succeeded in temporarily containing the Soviet advance. The situation in the north was more under the German control. The Red Army failed to break through the German defenses near Smolensk. At the same time, the Germans had finished their withdrawal to the new line, strengthening their positions further. By this time, the Germans had been able to maintain the balance and check the Red Army's attack.
I feel like right now the Soviets are fighting with a lot of kind of mediocre type of equipment, and I feel like that's why they're not getting, like, they're able to break through, but at the same time, even this stretched out freaking German line is still able to contain them a little bit. And obviously, I feel like that's their strength is probably like 80% infantry. And the rest is like, you know, what they need, supportive. But I don't know, let's see what happens, guys.
Had been able to maintain the balance and check the Red Army's attacks. However, the renewal of the Soviet offensive near the sea broke the German line and forced them into a large-scale retreat. Even more, the concurrent offensive against the lightly fortified German positions on the former western edge of the Kursk salient resulted in a breakthrough the Germans weren't able to contain. They now realized that they lacked the troops necessary to contain the Soviets in their present line and ordered a retreat to a much better defendable Panther wartime position that was centered around the Dnieper River and its tributaries. At the same time, the Soviet breakthrough near Smolensk hastened the retreat of Army Group Center. With the German forces taking a stronger defensive position, the Red Army had to concentrate its main effort on a shorter section of the front. They decided to make regaining western Ukraine the main priority. First, however, we'll take a look at the central part of the front, where the Red Army had outrun the Germans to the Dnieper and had
Yeah, I'm pretty sure mainly because, that's obviously their, as I've been saying in the past videos, that's their main breadbasket. So, I'm saying, for them to get that, they would, it would allow them to keep pushing towards Berlin like we see happens in our timeline. Let's keep going, guys.
They had outrun the Germans to the Dnieper and had established a breachhead on the junctions of the Army Group Center and South. They planned to trap the whole Army Group Center by combined strikes from the breachhead and from a breakthrough in the north, while the other forces would pin the Germans in place. In October, while part of the Red Army was still recovering from the pursuit, battles were...
See, I feel like I've been saying this, again, past videos, I feel like I've been saying this, but, saying if they just had that extra strength coming from the north, and they should be able to get it. And let's see if that works though. Let's see if I've actually been right, or if I've been just talking out my plans.
The Red Army was still recovering from the pursuit. Battles were fought in order to secure the breachhead. Meanwhile, the other forces began creating a breach in the northern part of the front. With their main focus being in the south, the Red Army had established several breachheads over the Dnieper in Ukraine. After they had got their heavy equipment over the river, they attempted local breakouts, first of which took place in the south. The Germans were able to contain it. Then the Soviets broke through the German land front, severing their connection with the Crimea. They proceeded with another breakout attempt near Kiev, but the Germans redeployed their troops and pushed it back towards the river. Having not fully succeeded in the breakouts, the Red Army adopted a more systematic approach, slowly but surely expanding its breachheads and massing troops for a larger breakout. In the center, the Red Army was now better prepared, which allowed it to increase the pressure. It resulted in a breakthrough in the north. The Germans held on to the flanks in the hopes of conducting a counterattack and cutting the Soviet forces off. Then the Soviets launched their...
I feel like at this time too, as we just saw, almost twice as many men as they have. The Russians, I think, had 1,600,000 men, and the Germans only have 900,000 men. So I feel like at this point, this is where the German army is starting to see the Soviets as, what we later started hearing them recall them as, that cast iron, never-ending force that just keeps coming. Because by this time, these men have already cut down so many different Russians, and they just keep coming, millions upon millions. And and obviously I feel like this is starting to break down their will, because for the most part, these are like a lot of these German people are probably 20, 25, 20, they're really young, so they're starting to, they miss home and shit. But all right, let's keep going, guys. Talk too much.
And cutting the Soviet forces off. Then the Soviets launched their main attack from the southern breachhead. It broke through the lines and gained limited success, though it failed to achieve its objective. The Germans were able to prevent a deeper breakthrough by abandoning territory and pulling back their front line. As 1943 ended, the Red Army was ready for the winter offensive, which would encompass the whole Soviet-German front. In Ukraine, the Germans had concentrated their defenses in the Great Bend of the Dnieper. This allowed the Red Army to catch them off balance by mounting a breakout from the Kiev breachhead. The Germans managed to contain their advance only with great difficulties. They wanted to keep their last position near the Dnieper River as a staging area for a possible counterattack, and did not evacuate it despite the evident threat. The Red Army exploited this by...
I'm surprised they didn't try the second breakout just a little bit north of Kiev. Because, obviously this is just, on computer, and obviously this isn't real life, but looking on here, they had this huge gap that was probably at least a few hundred meters long, so I feel like they should have been able to get through that, but obviously there's had to be a reason why not. Let's go ahead and get back into it though, guys.
Despite the evident threat. The Red Army exploited this by cutting the salient off with a two-pronged attack. The Germans launched a rescue attempt and were able to retrieve part of the encircled forces, but without their heavy equipment. With the German attention directed towards the pocket, the Soviet forces launched attacks on the flanks, threatening to sever the connection between the army groups south and center. Meanwhile, Soviet troops were continuing with their attempt to encircle Army Group Center itself. In the north, the Germans realized they lacked the force to cut off the Red Army's breakthrough and abandoned the exposed salients. The Red Army now attempted to encircle the town of Vitebsk, but it was not met with success. Most of the Red Army's offensive assets were deployed in the south, and as a result, the goals of the Soviet forces in the center proved to be beyond the means to achieve them. The offensives took limited territory at the price of large casualties and were eventually abandoned. During the summer, the Soviet pressure on the Army Group North had not been as strong as against the other army groups, and the Germans had dispatched a lot of its strength to other fronts. Despite its greatly reduced strength, the army group had not withdrawn to the shorter line and still held its forward positions. The Red Army attempted to encircle part of the German forces during the winter offensive. The Germans evaded the encirclement and then attempted to resist on the new position.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little surprised that the Finns weren't able to do a little bit more with what they had up there because, again, history is, shoulda, coulda, wouldas, but I feel like, I feel like they could have maybe, or obviously there's more to it, but why couldn't they have taken like a lot more? Because I feel like a lot of Russia's manpower were concentrated on the German front, so it's like why not take advantage of that? But obviously there's always a reason. There has to be a reason, but yeah, I have to do a little bit more research into it. Or let me know in the comments below if you guys know why. Let me just get back into it though, guys.
The encirclement and then attempted to resist on the new positions, but they lacked the strength to do so, and it was decided to withdraw to the Panther Line. Both armies settled on the new line, and during the remaining part of the winter, the Red Army undertook only some limited attacks in order to probe the German defenses. The Red Army was planning to achieve its main success in the south. During the preceding half-year, the Soviet forces were slowly but steadily consolidating their positions on the west bank of the Dnieper, and by the beginning of March, this process was complete. The German Army Group South was by then pushed into the open plains and did not retreat behind any other natural obstacle, leaving it vulnerable. The Soviets wanted to pin the whole army group to the Carpathian Mountains, or the Black Sea, and destroy it. The Axis were unable to resist the Soviet tank armies, and the whole front fell back. Near the Black Sea, they began pulling back their forces, but in the west, the Red Army encircled several German corps. The Soviets made the mistake by expecting the Germans to retreat southwards, which allowed them to extract most of the trapped force back to their front.
The Russians keep freaking missing opportunities to encircle and end it. You know what I'm saying? Like they keep letting them get back to their lines. Let's see, guys.
Trapped force back to their front lines. Then the Red Army captured the Crimea as the last operation of the winter campaign. The Soviet Union had taken back its most economically valuable...
That reminds me too, with Sevastopol. I know a few videos back I mentioned the Gustav gun, this huge massive railgun. That's right here. Pretty much, this is where it was used at the siege. Not at this point. It was actually probably a video or two ago. I just forgot all about it to say it, so I just remembered it right now. But this is actually where it was actually used at, was at the siege of Sevastopol, if I'm not mistaken. It was used to penetrate, I think, under 30 meters into the earth to blow up ammunition bunkers that were under there in Sevastopol, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm wrong, please let me know in the comments, but I'm pretty sure that that's what it was. But yeah, let's go and get back into a little fun fact.
The Union had taken back its most economically valuable lands and gained the resources it needed to defeat Germany completely. However, with the front being still more close to Moscow than Berlin, the question was, how long shall it take? The Germans, meanwhile, had other problems to deal with. The Western Allies had landed in Italy and were preparing to do the same in France. The race to Berlin was on.
Alright guys, we'll go ahead and stop it right there. And in my opinion, this is also where we start seeing the decline of Hitler, because, or at least of his mental state, because he starts making like these stupid, horribly stupid blunders, like during D-Day. Of all days, of all historically significant days, he sleeps in because he doesn't understand, like, just stuff like that. I'm not going to get into it. With that being said, though, thank you guys for joining me on another episode we're on our series of Eastory. On my next episode, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be doing a melody sheet video for my science reaction, and then from there we're just going to keep going into our series, guys. I'm going to probably be doing starting another series. I have to see into my comments what I was recommended on my next series to start. Why not, who cares if we're doing like 4 different series? We're going to good content, you know what I'm saying? So with that being said, please, if you guys like the content, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Please don't forget to check out my short series, Today in History. With that being said, I'll see you guys when I see you. I'm out. Peace!